A gute Woche und a freilichen Chanukah. This afternoon, the Rebbe Zalgazunza began the Farbrengen that this year Rosh Hashanah came out to be on a Shabbos. Being that Rosh Hashanah came out on a Shabbos, this has an effect on the entire year. That the entire year is a Shabbos-diki year. Because that is why it is called Rosh Hashanah. It's the head of the year. Just like the head has a control over the entire body. The same when we're talking about the Rosh, the beginning of the year, the Rosh Hashanah, not only is it Tchilas Hashanah, but it is Rosh Hashanah because it gives to the entire year. And this year, it gives a Shabbos-dikkeit into the entire year. And especially when we come to special days in the year, as now that we are in the days of Chanukah, there's something special which is given from the fact that Rosh Hashanah came out to be on Shabbos. And Chanukah is also on a Shabbos. And not only one Shabbos, but two Shabbos. Though every year we have Chanukah on a Shabbos, Chanukah is 8 days. So if Chanukah is 8 days, we always must have a Shabbos in Chanukah. But nonetheless, this year it is special because this year it begins with a Shabbos and ends with a Shabbos. And the Kriyas HaTorah which we read on the very first day of Chanukah, being that it is read on Shabbos, the Chanukah the Kriya, that it is read on a Shabbos, so and based on what Chazal tell us, that L'Kula Almi, everybody agrees that B'Shabbos Nitna Torah, that the Torah was given on Shabbos. So Memela, it has a special impact when this Kriyas HaTorah of the very first day of Rosh Hashanah is read on a Shabbos. The very first day of Chanukah, pardon me. The very first day of Chanukah is read on Shabbos. And the Kriya, the reading of the Torah, is something which is done publicly. And everybody can understand it. Anybody that understands Lashon HaKodesh can understand it. Even a guy that understands Lashon HaKodesh can understand it. And here the Rebbe went into a whole explanation that when the Rebbe created the world with Lashon HaKodesh. And the language which was spoken until the day of Haflaga was also Lashon HaKodesh. So everybody until then spoke Lashon HaKodesh, Goyim as well. Everyone spoke Lashon HaKodesh. It just when it came to the day of Haflaga and the Rebbe at that time, Bolal, the Rebbe had Oizgemisht, people would, that is when it began with all different languages, that is when Goyim began talking other languages. In fact, there's a whole discussion in the Yavitz, if we are permitted to use Lashon HaKodesh to talk in Yonim, not about Kedusha. Vachadike in Yonim in the language of Lashon HaKodesh. However, this discussion in the Yavitz, says the Rebbe, all of this comes after the Day Haflaga. Once there are other languages as well, so the question is, are we allowed to use Lashon HaKodesh for not Kedusha Dikenyanim, for Vacha Dikenyanim? But prior to the Day Haflaga, everybody at that time spoke only Lashon HaKodesh. So Lashon HaKodesh we see is something which anybody that understands Lashon HaKodesh can understand the Kriyas HaTorah of today, or the Kriya of the very first day of Chanukah. And it is taked the way the Rebbe created the world with Lashon HaKodesh, and that is how the Rebbe put the chayis of everything through Lashon HaKodesh into every item that he created. And with this we can understand what Chazal tell us, the wisdom of Adam HaRishon. That Adam HaRishon was so wise that he knew what name to call to everything after he was created. After Adam was created, so he came up with all the proper titles and all the proper names for all the animals and all the chayis, everything which was created, and all the behemoths, everything which was created in the world. So the question arises, what is the great chachma of Adam HaRishon that he figured out? Let's take for example, that shoyer has to be called shoyer. Or he figured out that chamoyer has to be called chamoyer. What's so wise in Adam that he was able to figure that out? However, as it's explained in Chassidus, Adam was able to see what is the source of chayis for every animal or for every behemoth. or for every chaya. And this is the name that he named it. So when he named Shoyer, so the Taich is, he realized that the chayis that goes into a Shoyer, so that a Shoyer should be able to exist, goes through these letters. And that was the wisdom of Adam HaRishon, and that is why he chose that Shoyer should be called Shoyer, or Chameir should be called Chameir, or anything else, whatever else he gave names to. And so, as the Alter Rebbe explains, everything has its chayis from the Rebishter, which is transmitted to it through oisias, through letters of Lashon HaKodesh, whether direct lettering, or in a way of chilufei oisias, an exchange of lettering, or a gematria of oisias, but everything has its chayis, which it gets from the Rebishter. When it comes Chanukah, what do we say is the whole idea of Chanukah? The whole message of Chanukah is that we have to bring lichtigkeit to the outside. That's the whole inyan lahadlik, to kindle the light al pesach beisa b'bachutz. And as the Gemara uses the expression, ad dekalya rigla de termedoi. It's an expression in Gemara. When the Gemara discusses until what time can we light Chanukah candles, so the Gemara uses the expression from sunset until Kalya Rigla de Talmudoi. What does this mean? So the simple meaning in Gemara is that there were a group of people that they were called Talmudoi. These people would walk the streets very late. So the Gemara says, as long as these people are still walking the streets, we can still light Chanukah licht. That's the simple meaning of the Gemara. Rebbe says there's a whole discussion who these Talmudoi were. There's an opinion that they were avodim, they were slaves. They were slaves in the days of Shloimeh. They were slaves. Rebbe says we know how careful we are in brachas. Whenever we have to make a bracha, how cautious we are about it. And nonetheless, we make one bracha every morning, Shelo Yasani Goy. And another bracha we make specifically, Shelo Yasani Ovid. But getting back to the inyan of what a Talmud, so Chassidus explains that Talmud is the letters of Moiredes, rebelling. In other words, what is the concept of Chanukah? The concept of Chanukah is to bring light, that there should be no more to outroot the concept of rebellion against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to outroot that from the street. In other words, ad dekalya rigla de Talmudoi, until the Talmudoi will no longer be walking the streets. No, in other words, the concept of Talmud, oisias, moirades, will be totally abolished. And that is the message of Chanukah. And if a Yid knows that anywhere there is still a concept of Talmudoi going on, and being that this is brought to our attention, and we know about it, and we know what Ashkoche Pratis teaches us, that being that we know about this, this in itself is an indication that this has a shaykhis to us. So if so, it has a shaykhis to us, we have to know what is our responsibility. Our responsibility is to bring light and to outroot and to totally destroy this concept of Talmudoi. Here the Rebbe goes on and he says that regarding the two Yomim Tovim which we have, Midrabanan, Chanukah and Purim. So for Chanukah we know there's a Megillah. Megillah Esther. I'm sorry, for Purim. Excuse me. For Purim there's a Megillah Esther. However, for Chanukah there's also a Megillah. What is the Megillah of Chanukah? It's called Megillas Antiochus. And there are many communities, many noteworthy communities, where it is customary to read this Megillah. Rebbe says he doesn't know if it's read once during Chanukah or it's read every day during Chanukah, but regardless, the Megillah is read in Chanukah. We are not accustomed to that. But still in all, the Megillah of Megillas Esther is part of the Chavdalut Sifrei Kodesh. It's part of Tanakh. However, the Megillah of Megillas Antiochus is not part of Tanakh. What does this show us? This shows that the birur, the avodas habirurim, which we accomplish with Chanukah, is in Welt. World remains world. It remains a Megillah. It's still called the Megillas Antiochus. And into there we bring kedusha. We
bring the concept of outrooting Ragla to Talmudoi and to instill there the Lichtigkeit which the Neir Chanukah brings. And this corresponds to this week's Seder. Vayeshev Yaakov Beretz Canaan. So Chassidus explains what's the inyan of Canaan. Canaan, explaining Chassidus, relates to the concept of a merchant. One doing business is called Canaan. So we know what's called proper doing business. Proper way to do business is not when one buys for the same amount and he sells for the same amount. Then he's not doing business. Then he didn't make any profits. What's the taich when a person does business? He buys for less and he sells for more. That is when he was profitable. So what do we say in Ruchnius? It's the same idea. What is the concept of Chanukah? Vayeshev Yaakov Beretz Canaan. Yaakov hat sich besetzt where in other words, Canaan standing for Mischa, for Welt. In Welt. In Olam Hazeh. And Dafke there. Yaakov Bikesh, Yaakov Leishav B'Shalva. Yaakov wanted to sit in peace. In the way of his Yashvus. And into there, Atman Oiskefir, that is where we brought into Kavanah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that in Canaan, in the concept of Mischa, that is where we bring the idea of Lasis Lo Yisbarach Dira B'Tachtoin. And this is what the message of Chanukah is all about. Here the Rebbe mentioned that being that we are now in these days, soon we will have Nittel. Nittel, we know we don't learn during Nittel. In fact, it is known that the Rebbe Rashab would play chess Nittel night. The Rebbe said he once heard from a Talmud in Temchet Mimim. The Talmud in Temchet Mimim, somebody learned in Lubavitch. And in Lubavitch, he was walking around, he was dressed, his clothes were torn, buttons were missing, he was dressed very, very extremely neglected. So he was asked, how come you dress so neglected? So he said, if I'll take care of it now, I wouldn't have what to do Nittel night. Come Nittel night, then I know I have one night in here Nittel. Nittel, we know we're not allowed to learn. So that is when he repairs all his clothes. Like mentioning this, how then he will mend all his clothes and everything that needs repair will be repaired. So talking about the way clothes, the repairs that have to be done in the clothes, the Rebbe also mentioned clothes have to be worn right on left. Buttons, Chassidim were always careful that clothes should be buttoned from right over left. Mentioned it in an indirect way, mentioned it here as well. And talking about the Rebbe Rashab, who would play chess on Nittel night, Rebbe says that, mentioned that, think about the Rebbe Rashab, those who saw him, or those at least who see him through a picture, it was throughout his entire lifetime, the Rebbe Rashab did not allow that a picture should be taken from him. It was when he had to leave Rostov, and it seems like, Rebbe didn't use this word, but it seems like for passport purposes. That is when he needed a picture. The picture which we have from the Rebbe Rashab is which was taken at such an occasion. And once we have the picture, we can already look at him and fulfill that we will see and by seeing the Rabbeim, this can lead to an increase in Ava and Yira. And the Rebbe mentioned that from the Rabbeim, from the Tzemach Tzedek, we have a drawing. From the Alter Rebbe, we also have a drawing. So the Rebbe, when he mentioned the Tzemach Tzedek's drawing, the Rebbe says it was made. In other words, when it was done, the Tzemach Tzedek did not know about it. From the Alter Rebbe, we also have a picture. From the Maggid and the Baal Shem, we do not have any pictures. And the picture that is popular as a painting of the Baal Shem, says the Rebbe, this is not from the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Torah Chassidus. In other words, the Rebbe didn't touch up, but it seems there were other Baal Shems. Yes. We read in the memoirs of the Frierdiker Rebbe, could be that this picture, this painting is from one of the other Baal Shems, but it is not a painting, it's not a drawing of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Torah Chassidus. The Rebbe urged very strongly that, being that during days which we are now, there's vacation in public schools, So it's a proper time to reach out to those children who are not as yet getting a Jewish education, to reach out to them and see to it that at least during this week, when they have vacation, they should attend Talmud Torah and so forth, and to utilize the time properly. I spoke also very strong about the concept of Chanukah Geld. The Chanukah Geld is a minig Yisrael, that it is given to the children. And as we see by the Rabbeim, that there was a special night when the entire family would get together, and then the Rebbe would distribute Chanukah Geld, and to all children, even to those children who are married. As far as lighting the menorah, we do not find that the girls in the house of Rabbi Seinu Nesienu, that they lit the menorah. Menorah lighting is something which is only for the boys were lighting the menorah. Even after they became Bas Mitzvah, they also did not light the menorah. However, Chanukah Geld is something which everyone has a shaykhis to, and spoke about it very, very warm, very strongly about the importance of Chanukah Geld, the significance of Chanukah Geld, making sure that everybody should receive Chanukah Geld. And talking about the menorah, and talking about the significance of the menorah, it's very interesting that in the middle of the Sikha, the Rebbe turned around and wanted to see the big menorah which is in 770. And the Rebbe rose from his place, got up from his place to have a look at the menorah. And the Rebbe asked if the menorah, if there's a candle in it lighting. And he was told no. The Rebbe said that it should be corrected for next week, but the Gabbayim should correct it that next week, next Shabbos,
the menorah should be lit with such candles that should be able to burn for the entire Shabbos. B'chlal, we know that during the weekdays of Chanukah, the menorah is lit in shul every evening, and nonetheless, the next morning, when we come into shul again, we also light the Chanukah menorah. Licht are also put into the menorah, into the shul menorah. And it's done without a bracha, but it is done. But as far as Shabbos, we said it should be just like in the Beis HaMikdash, that the menorah was always burning. So the same way to light the Chanukah menorah, which will be lit next Friday, that it was the last lichtel, the 8th lichtel, so his Chanukah should be lit, that it should be able to burn for the entire Shabbos. And this lighting of the Chanukah menorah, which we began lighting yesterday. Yesterday we made the Shechayanu. This should lead us into that in the middle of Chanukah yet, we should be able to be zeicha to see Aaron HaKoyen lighting the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. This is a special year. It's a year of Tafshin Nun, and as it was already interpreted many times, that Tafshin Nun means Tehei Shnas Nisim. So Mamela, we are waiting for the main and final nest, which that will be with the Gula Shlema, the coming of Mashiach, and without any problems, because problems we already had plenty in our generation. And Leisokum Pamayim Tzara, we shouldn't have a repeat of a Tzara again, Chas v'Shalom. So Mamela, all that we are waiting for is that Mashiach should come, and once Mashiach comes and we go out of Golas, then we will be able to light the menorah again in the Beis HaMikdash. Especially the Kriyas HaTorah of today, the Kriya of Chanukah. We read about the first Nasi, the Nasi of Nachshon ben Aminadov. He was the Nasi of Shevet Yehuda. And what is Nachshon ben Aminadov is known for his Mesiras Nefesh. He was the first one that was ready to jump into the sea. In other words, he possessed the talent of Mesiras Nefesh. And this is something which every Yid should be able to possess. Every Yid should have this inyan of Mesiras Nefesh. And this is something which Nasi Dereinu, the Frierdiker Rebbe, as we know, was very much into the concept of Mesiras Nefesh, and the Avodah of the Frierdiker Rebbe is spelled out in his name. His name was Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, and Yosef underlines, the Rebbe always refers to the pasuk, Yosef Hashem li bein acher. That's the pasuk, that expression that Rachel used when Yosef was born. And we know the famous Taich, the Tzemach Tzedek. Yosef Hashem li bein acher, the Tzemach Tzedek Taich, that the Avodah of a Yid is to reach out to the one who until now is an acher. He's an outsider. He has no shaykhs to Kedusha, and he should become a bein to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this Avodah is done amidst the spirit of Yitzchak. What is the idea of Yitzchak? Yitzchak is Meloshen Tzchoik, laughter, simcha. In other words, we do this Avodah with an
when this Aveda comes together with Simcha, and then we are successful in fulfilling this concept of Yosef Hashem Li Bein Acher, to see to it that we reach out, that those who are far and at a distance and are considered in the level of Acher should become a ben. It should be obvious that they are a ben to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I've also mentioned that during Chanukah it's customary to increase the giving of tzedakah. And this is also merumez in the name of the Nasi, Nachshon ben Aminodov, Nodov, Meloshin Nidova, Meloshin tzedakah, Meloshin contribution. And it's also appropriate on Chanukah to increase, to be meisef in the giving of tzedakah. Later in the second Sikha, the Rebbe began that it's customary that at Farbrengen's Shabbos afternoon, we already discussed an inyan that has a shayches to the Sedra, which we are going to begin reading by Mincha. And by Mincha we are beginning today the Parsha of Miketz. What is the inyan of Miketz? Miketz is an end. And that's what we are waiting for. We are waiting for that it should come the end of Golus, and should come to Geula. Miketz, an end to the Golus. And just like we read in the Seder of Parshas Miketz, we read about the chaloimes, about the dreams. What's the pshat a person dreams? When a person dreams, he sees things which normally, under realistic circumstances, he would not be able to bring these things together. But once he's in a dream, he's bringing these things together. What is the taich Miketz? We should come to an end of dreams. In other words, we should come to a realistic tkufa. That will be time when Mashiach will come. The Rebbe expressed himself. A Yid has to know that if he's at a stage of dreams, in other words, he's at a stage of confusion, what should he do? He has to go to the Yosef HaTzadik. Just like they then, when they wanted to have a clearance, an interpretation in their dream, what did they do? They went to Yosef. The same we have to know when we are at a stage of chaloim. What's the pshat of cholam? A cholam is the type we are mixed up for a moment. We don't have a clear picture. What does a Yid have to do in such a time? He has to go to Nasi Dereinu, and there he will receive the proper interpretation of his dream. The Rebbe said that Yidden already for such a long time
are begging Ad Mosai. How much longer will we be in Golus? This expression of Ad Mosai already began in the days of the Navi Daniel. And since then, for thousands of years, Yidden are begging Ad Mosai. And even when Yidden are amongst themselves and are in conversation amongst themselves, also at such occasions Yidden are also talking about, what are Yidden talking about? Ad Mosai, how much longer will we be in Golus? Maybe it's already the highest point that the Rebbe should accept this wish of Yidden, this expression of Yidden, of Ad Mosai, how much longer should we be in Golus? The Rebbe referred to an episode that Yidden once, a group of Chassidish Yidden were once walking in Moscow. And this was in an area where Yidden Bechlal were prohibited to live. And for Jews to live there, they needed a special permit. And a group of Yidden were walking, Chassidim, they were walking from a Farbrengen. And we can understand the way Chassidim were walking from a Farbrengen, so they were singing to themselves, and they were loud. And the neighbors, who were not Yiddish neighbors, heard them late at night. So somebody who was responsible to watch for the order of the streets, in other words, a policeman, went over to them and asked them, who is going here? In other words, Gashmi means that he asked them, who are they? What are they doing in this exclusive area at such a time, walking as a Yuvgalekt and singing? And the policeman obviously knew that these Yidden had no right to live there. And he said, Ver Geita. And the Rebbe interpreted, Ver Geita, who is going here? And as the Rebbe interpreted, what's the Taich Gein? Even this policeman who was a goy, and a goy has no bchira, so kind of he himself understood that they are at a level of going, of being a mahalich, going higher and higher, going from mechayil al choyil, constantly going higher and higher in kedusha. What did they answer? They were coming from a Chassidish Farbrengen. So what did they say? Bittel idiot. It seems like it's a Russian expression. Bittel is going. In other words, they too responded that they are at a level of bittel. And at this level, they are also trying to go higher, higher, and yet higher. But it's gefehrt that through this Aveda, we should be zeicha that soon we should be able to have the Beis HaMikdash and Aaron Kohen Gadol lighting the neiros in the Beis HaMikdash, and all of this should be immediately. A gute Woche und a freilichen Chanukah.